Hi, this is Phil, and I'm here to tell you all about the Capes and Lunatics Patreon. Don't miss out on our comic book creator interviews, including our monthly Chichester chats with comic book legend DG Chichester, superhero movie brackets in our search for the worst comic book movie of all time, and many, many more specials, all completely uncensored. Access starts for $3 a month, full video when you pledge $5 a month. Check out the link in our show notes or go to patreon.com/CapesandLunatics. Hope to see you there. Hello, everyone. Welcome back to another week of We Are the Night, the Batman podcast. I am Phil. I am Lilith. Or, I am not Lilith. Okay.
I'm Lilith.
I'm rushing it. I don't know. I'm Phil. That is Lilith, hiding behind the Catwoman picture. Yes, but we have a special guest with us today, Mr. Cliff Chiang. How are you, sir?
I'm good, thanks.
The writer. What is this? The writer?
The every guy except for the editor.
I know. On Catwoman Lonely City.
That's a very unique thing to be able to pull off, honestly.
Yeah, I mean, it was always, I think, a creative goal of mine to be able to, do all of it. I think it's certainly less common in superhero comics, but, with indie comics, you see people doing it all the time. And, and I just like the kind of feel that you get from doing, from having a single creator, do all those jobs. And, so wanted to give it a shot and see what that how it turns out, what it looks like on a superhero book.
Well, I think you set the gold standard, sir.
Thanks.
So how does your process differ when you're doing all of the heavy lifting and you're not like sharing with like a penciler or writer or colorist or?
Yeah, honestly, it's a really good question. And, I wasn't sure, which is why this project took a lot of planning. I didn't want to just wing it. And, as it turns out, it's a ton of work. When I get a script from another writer, usually they've kind of figured out a lot of things. They've figured out like the general shape of the story. They know where it's going. They know how to fit it into, 20, 22 pages. And when it comes to me, I'm trying to figure out visually what's the best way to tell that story, and going off, the way they've already broken down, say, like panel descriptions and things like that, and how many panels are on the page. If I have a better idea or a different idea, then, I'm usually free to explore that. But a lot of that has been done already. With this, I had control over all of it, which was fantastic. I think creatively, there's a lot of little details and nuance that you can add to a story by virtue of having control over everything, the pacing, the overall story, the coloring, and even the lettering. That's a lot of control and it's a lot of decisions to make. And, it definitely slowed me down, but knowing that, I came into it, I wrote the whole thing, all 4 issues at once, before I started drawing. I wanted to make sure that as a script, you could evaluate it just almost in an abstract way as a story and say this works and this doesn't work before you start drawing things, and you kind of can be seduced by those drawings into thinking that something is better than it is. So just kind of wanted to meat and potatoes of the book to work first. And then once I had a script that, I showed the editors and got notes back and everything, then I started doing thumbnails for it. And just to make sure that, what I wrote matched up. That part was easier because, I kind of do that on every project. But what was different then here is that I then took the thumbnails and started lettering over them so that we had a really rough version of the whole story. And that was all done, I don't know, almost like 2 years ago. So we could read it and say like, oh, this works. And this scene maybe is missing something. And that was really useful to me and to the editors. And they could see what the story was going to be, even just like kind of in a rough shape with some, very chicken scratch kind of thumbnails.
And from day one, was it always envisioned for the oversized like black label format? Because I think that it made a great story even better because it seems much more cinematic. Great, your art is great on this, and it's just that it benefits it even more from, I think, the larger size.
Yeah, thanks. I think early on I was thinking to keep it, regular comic size, mm-hmm. But they said, we would like all these black label books to have something special about them, and the trim size is really important to that. I said, all right, well, sure. Then, that's great. And, what I realized doing it was that the larger page size for me meant I could fit more panels on the page and cram in more story. I think that was the important thing. A lot of the book is kind of this love letter to, 80s DC comics that were aimed at an older audience. And a lot of what, gives you that feel is the density, a lot of panel density, a lot of story density. And, for me, I don't always need to do like big panels. I really love being able to break down moments and make the reader feel something that way. So having more panels on a page really worked. And, I don't know how I would have done it without that. Probably would have taken, another full issue. And, I don't know, that probably would have killed me.
So, like, were you definitively it was going to be 4 issues, or what you ended up writing ultimately ended up being 4 issues? It kind of worked out in some ways, again, being inspired by, something like Dark Knight Returns. I wanted to figure it out. Here's 4 issues. If Frank Miller and Klaus Janson and Lynn Varley could do it, and John Costanza could do it in 4 issues, I wanted to do something similar. And within those constraints, what kind of story could I tell? So 48 pages, 4 issues, I still feel like, I probably could have used more pages here and there. We all thought that because it's such a great story.
Oh.
So.
Yeah, it's tricky, because sometimes the pacing, you need an extra page here and there, and that doesn't fit into, the page count that you want. You can't have a 49 page or a 50 page book. So, so you have to work within that. And, but, overall, I think, it feels, I wanted to get it to a place, between the page size and the page count. Like, I had to know all that before even starting to write, because that drastically changes what, you can do on a page.
I think, I could see you doing this in the regular format, but since this is Black Label and they do let you go a little more mature, did that affect the writing at all? Did you change anything or have like a different idea of something?
It definitely, the project started as a Black Label project, okay. Knowing that. And, it meant that I could assume that, most of the readers were going to be a bit older and interested in stuff other than getting, they wanted something left to center, and then hopefully something that might appeal to an older sensibility. I think there's a lot of, aside from like the main story, I think there are a lot of issues brought up by it that are interesting to adults. So there's nothing, other than the language, I don't think there's anything in here that you couldn't show to a kid.
Yeah.
But I wouldn't expect them to be interested in it.
Yes, also people are worried about aging.
Right.
I welcome death.
Oh, jeez. You're not even 40. Stop it.
I know.
But no, I mean, we enjoyed this series from day one. The first issue came out, I believe. What was it, after 3, Lilith? You're like, we have to talk to Cliff. I'm like, yes, I know. I will try to make that happen.
I think it was after 2. I'm like, you think he'll talk to us?
I think it was after 3, because, you know, when we contacted you, said, oh, let's do it around 4. Okay. And then we were all disappointed because it got pushed back. I was like, oh, man.
Yeah, this book definitely took a lot longer than I thought it was going to. I have a fairly good idea of how quickly I can produce stuff, but I think between the larger page size, which was about like 30-40% larger, and then like the higher panel count per page, just kind of doubled my usual production time. So, on top of like other personal stuff that happened, in the past year. So it kind of just got out of control, and I didn't want to rush any of it. We got to a point where, editorial knew, how much care I was putting into the book, and they supported me every step of the way. And then by the time we got to the end, the only thing that was really, that we couldn't fight was the calendar. That we wanted a hardcover collection to be out for the holidays, which meant, and you had to kind of back up the deadline from, the latest you could get a hardcover collection out, was December. And then, which meant having the book done by October. So, I mean, I probably would have taken a few more months on it if I had it, but, but I'm glad it's done, and I'm happy with how it turned out.
Oh, it was very nice. So have you all?
Definitely could feel like a passion. It definitely felt like a passion project. It also gave me those like old school vibes of like the stuff you did like on like Creeper, and then the Spectre stuff that you did too. Like just pulling from your DC background. It felt really nice.
Yeah, I mean, I've worked with DC for a long time, and worked on a lot of the characters, and there's definitely a way in which this story is about my time with DC as well. I mean, having been on staff there and all the friends I made, and kind of just being able to look back on, my time there in the same way that Selena looks back at her time as Catwoman, So there's a lot of me in the book. And
you did some assistant editing, right?
Yeah.
Among being an illustrator, obviously, but yeah, I remember that right. Okay.
So, are you a big Batman and Catwoman fan then?
I mean, as much as anybody else, I think, I mean, yeah, of course, everybody loves Batman and Catwoman. And I think that was kind of my starting point, is that people are very familiar with Catwoman, but they haven't necessarily read a lot of her. But she shows up so much in anything Batman related, you going back to like the TV show, the 60s TV show. And so in terms of like her, the public is very aware of her, but they don't know that much about her other than that she wears, a cat costume, and that she's involved with Batman and she's a villain. And that's kind of all you need to know for the book, to get into the book, to be able to read the book. And that was an important thing for me, that, there's so much publishing history and continuity, and oftentimes contradictory continuity. I didn't want to have to require people to read that. I don't know it, but I also wanted to embrace it as well, and like all the different versions of her. So, I want to just start with a baseline of what kind of pop culturally people know about Catwoman, and go from there, or any of the other villains, and if you didn't know, and if there are details, then I can fill them in as we go along. But, hopefully you can hand this book to anybody on the street and they'll be able to follow along, and they won't be like, what is this? This is, and I think that's, for people like us who have been reading comics all our lives and following these characters, it can be easy to forget that, there's something intimidating about, a character's whole publishing history, and then in this case, we just kind of just stop it, and when we've picked up now where she's older, and then we can kind of fill in whatever information the reader needs as we go, and not expect them to know it. But if you do, there's a lot of great like little Easter eggs and things like that, to just acknowledge that, I understand, I see, where you're coming from, and what your history with the character might be, and what you might love about them.
I mean, I love Batman. It's one of my favorite characters, but we've discussed it before where it's like, I think a lot of characters like Catwoman, like Nightwing, a lot of these characters
suffer
like
from being in his shadow.
Yeah, sometimes their stories shine even brighter and better like when he's not around. So did you find that more freeing, except for like a flashback here and there, like there was no Batman in this story?
Yeah, certainly like the shadow of Batman like kind of looms over the whole thing, because what is the big question is what does Gotham become without Batman? What's Gotham without Batman? And and then what follows from that is, well, it's not just Batman, it's Batman and the Joker and Commissioner Gordon, that kind of control like the fate of the city in a lot of ways. So taking them out, to me, intellectually was really interesting. Like what happens to that city? And then, for me, the answer was, well, it just starts to look a lot more like New York, like modern New York. I always kind of bristle a little bit when I hear people describe this book as being a future story, because it's not. It takes place now, as if Batman appeared, in 1986 or 1987, Batman Year One, and aged chronologically with the rest of us. So there's nothing in this book that feels very sci-fi to me, and a lot of the issues that are coming up in it, involving privacy and militarization of police forces, like those are real contemporary problems. And inequality and racism, it's all stuff that we're dealing with now in our cities. And, I wanted to see what happens when you bring those issues into a DC comic too, and how can you treat them? How can you touch on them? Because you can't solve any of these issues in a way that doesn't seem pat, but like, I want them there, as an acknowledgement that these characters also live in a world that's complicated and textured.
Is that like the key to like a good, like, well, a Catwoman or a Batman story? It's like to keep it grounded, I mean, again, you could go sci-fi or something, but to keep it like grounded, like a story like this, very grounded, very realistic.
I think it can be, that's definitely one approach. And I don't want, this is a story that I decided to tell, but I could also see myself, doing like a very shiny, happy Super Friends Batman story. I think, you have to decide, for the what's right for the story. And in this case, I wanted it to be something that seemed more grounded and yet also embraced all the craziness of the DCU.
That's good. Lilith, you're being quiet over there.
Oh, sorry. I was just letting you get all your questions out. I did have a question about how the variants are. I loved all the variants, by the way. But like, do you get a say on like, because I really hope so and so can do a variant, or do the editorial just kind of pick a name out of the hat?
Yeah, no. They asked me who I thought would be would fit, and I gave them a nice list, and it was really great to work with the people that we got on the variants. Like I loved all of them. I thought, they each did their own thing with it, which is what we really want from a variant. You want to see people's, individuality come through. It doesn't need to look like what I do, like you're already getting enough of that. And, and I did one variant out of each, on each issue as well. So I think it helped kind of round out, the feel of the book.
Yeah, they were all really great in their own way, definitely.
All right. So besides Catwoman, who was like who was your other favorite character in this story? Who was like a joy to write? Yeah,
they were all lots of fun. I wouldn't have written them in if they weren't fun. Even, Two-Face, I actually wish I'd gotten to flesh him out a little bit more. They were all, they all kind of, they're all different facets of me in some ways, so it's kind of hard to say like, which side I get to express more, but certainly, Poison Ivy's was a lot of fun, kind of almost writing her like a big drag queen, and with that kind of personality, and brash charm, and Eddie being more sly Ed Enigma, the Riddler, you know, and his kind of almost, I don't know, his need to be right, you know. So all the characters were a lot of fun to do, and it really was a matter of drilling down and finding out what makes them tick, and what they want in the framework of the story. And it made it easier to write them, you know, once I figured that out. If I didn't have that, then, you know, then it becomes harder, because then you're just kind of grafting personality onto something without giving them a real desire or need for anything.
I mean, and even Croc, I can't remember the last time I read a Batman story where I actually like cared about Croc, and
right,
yeah, where he wasn't just like a drooling, growling monster. Yeah,
right. You know, it really, you know, it really depends on how much you need, you know, for their character to come through. You know, if you just need someone to be angry and scary and strong, then, you know, that's all you're going to get, and you can only go so far with it. So, you know, that's what I wanted was, you know, a story that had like a certain kind of plot skeleton that we're used to, like a heist story, you know, and you kind of know how those go. You know, everyone has, you know what the pace of that is, you know where the twists are, you know, it's a familiar kind of story. But what's great about that kind of setup is that you can then use the audience's familiarity with that to hang a lot of cool character moments onto it, you know. So, you know, it gives you, you know, having that kind of direction and that kind of, you know, rhythm and arc to the story, you know, it just gives you an excuse to play with actual characters talking to each other, you know, and if the characters are just talking to each other to move the plot forward, that's when the stories get really dry, and then you're missing out on all the kind of life and personality that you can get out of a comic.
Oh yeah, especially a lot of these Batman characters. I mean, there's so much you could play with there, and that's, you know, sometimes I think their potential isn't fully realized in a lot of these stories.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's like the genius of, you know, like the original Batman animated series from the 90s is like they really thought about the psychological underpinning of all these characters and put that into each episode, you know, so that it felt like you were seeing these characters in a new way, but also in a way that completely made sense.
Oh yeah, I believe, wasn't it Mr. Freeze was like basically considered a joke until they, you know, revitalized him in the animated series and gave him the backstory and everything. Now that's like the backstory.
Right.
Didn't you get to work with Paul Dini on a Zatanna story? I feel like maybe.
Yeah, several issues of Zatanna. It was a lot of fun. You know, I have so much respect for Paul's work, and to get to work from one of his scripts was really cool. You know, because I hadn't, you know, I'd read some of, you know, his comics work before, but, you know, it's not until you actually get a script that you can see, oh, well, this is, you know, this is what he gives you to play with, and with a character like Zatanna that he clearly is, you know, so such a big fan of, you know, and then all the, you know, within just the few issues that I did, you know, being able to kind of, you know, draw all these cool things with her, you know, her house, and then going to like this strange castle, and it was a lot of fun. It was a lot of fun.
See, I was sitting here thinking, I was like, what do we need from Cliff next? Oh, maybe a Zatanna miniseries.
No. Human Target.
Oh,
the next Human Target, because he did some original stuff, some other stuff that I really liked. I think that was like back in the 2000s, right?
Yeah, with Peter Milligan and Javier Pulido.
Yeah, I love that particular Human Target. Yeah, and you know they've been revitalizing that character. Thank God. So I'd like to see you do some work on that if you ever feel like it. Just gonna throw that out there.
Sure. Yeah. No, I'm a fan of you know, and yeah, the new Human Target's great.
Or you know, the Green Arrow book, whenever that comes back out. Huge Green Arrow fan,
Black Canary.
Yeah, if we could get a Black Canary solo book, like, let's just work on that first.
I just thought
but he's got such a great body of work that it's just like, yeah, anything you wanted to revisit or anything new, I'm totally always down for.
I like doing new things. I feel like, you know, I really enjoyed working on all those characters for the books that I did, but, you know, part of me is always thinking like, what's another thing that I haven't drawn, or what's another angle, you know, that I haven't done. So sometimes, you know, I could see it leading back to a character that I've drawn already, but, or one that I haven't drawn enough of.
Is there one DC character you haven't drawn that you are just dying to draw in a book?
No, it's funny. I never really think about work that way. People always, it's a common question that comes up, it's like, is there someone at Marvel or DC that you would really love to draw? Or even broader, like, what, property would you really like to work on? And I usually don't have an answer for that because a lot of it depends on the story. You can get like a great story with a little known character, and that's going to be much more appealing than drawing like an event book with a very story that doesn't work for me, So I think after a while, getting to draw, a character even in one panel or two kind of scratches that itch for me, as far as like, being able to check it off the list. And if I have to live with something like drawing a book, 4 issues or whatever, then, I have to know that the story is really good. And in that case, it could be anybody,
Like if they came to you for a project and they said, "Hey, would you just write this and not illustrate it?" Would you do that, or are you an artist at heart? You're like, I don't care if I'm writing it or not. I have to draw.
Yeah, I really do enjoy drawing as storytelling, and I think the idea of writing for somebody else, I hadn't really considered it, partially because it's so much work for me. Like it's not second nature, the way drawing has become. I'm not necessarily comfortable with it enough to, to hand that off to somebody else to draw. And also because it's so much work too, I kind of feel like I would like to be the one to draw it,
So did DC come to you with this, or was this your original idea and you pitched it to them?
Right. They came to me about a project. They said, we would love to see, what you would do with Black Label. And, is there anything that you would want to write and draw? And this was, right after or right when they announced Black Label. So it was Mark Doyle and Chris Conroy who edited the book. And they came to me and they asked what I would like to do. And I was like, I don't know. And they said, we'd love to see what your new frontier is, Darwin Cook's New Frontier. And I thought, wow, I was so flattered by that. I love Darwin's work, and I think New Frontier is just a fantastic book. And, what they meant by that was, kind of this expansive take on the DCU. They wanted to see, how I would design it and what that would look like. And, I spent about 6 months trying to come up with that idea. I was so flattered that they asked me to write something for myself. When I hadn't taken that step and hadn't pushed for it myself, it was really empowering, to know that somebody else had that confidence in me, even when I wasn't ready to grab that brass ring myself. But it took me about 6 months to wrap my head around that kind of idea. And, and then I realized at the end of that 6 months, because I was supposed to have a phone call with them, I was like, because I didn't have anything. I said, call me in 6 months. And I didn't have anything. And I realized that I don't have that same kind of like all abiding knowledge and love of the DCU to make a series like that worthwhile, and personal enough, but what I did realize is that, I'm probably better with a smaller, more personal story, and to focus on the characters. With a big epic thing like that, you're going to have a lot of characters that only get a little bit of screen time, and that's really tricky. That's really hard to write. And for me, I think it would have been too much to take on. So, I realize that I love superhero comics when they play with other genres as well. So, the idea of like, say, like a Wonder Woman war story, would have been really cool, like a World War II kind of thing. But, I also felt like maybe it was too soon after doing, the New 52 Wonder Woman with Brian Azzarello. And, the idea of a Catwoman heist story seemed like a natural, and again with Darwin, Selena's Big Score is such a great book, and very grounded. He wanted to present Selena as, do it as a crime book, and that was so fresh. We hadn't seen anybody take the character that seriously in a long time, so my idea was to then do my version of that, but that also brought in more of the kind of colorful stuff in Gotham, to bring in Batman, to bring in, more superhero stuff, just because, I feel like, this was my shot to play with those toys and see how it all works, in a something that's inspired by heist stories and inspired by crime and noir, but with that superhero element, always, in there, in the mix pretty prominently.
Yeah, I didn't know if they threw Catwoman out to you because first the Batman movie, but we're just getting so much good Selena Kyle content this year, because even Teenie Howard on the monthly book right now. I mean, we're loving that book. I don't know if it's...
And it's because they're giving her, like...
room from Batman, yeah.
Taking her out of the shadow of Batman, and they're, like, actually invested in her as a character, not as an accessory.
Right.
So, I think that's really important for Catwoman, specifically.
But yeah, I think like Lil said, you could tell you had fun with this book because, I mean, especially with the Batman characters, I mean, you could throw a rock and you're going to hit an interesting character, right? Either one of the heroes, the villains. I mean, so much of Gotham, there's interesting characters.
Yeah, there were, it's the kind of thing where, with enough time and space, I could have touched on more characters, definitely. There's, that kind of Dick Tracy aspect to Batman's Rogues Gallery, makes, they all have like a great, spin to each of them, and even, newer characters, they all work within that framework. And the idea was to also, just kind of embrace all of it too, to give, all the different versions of Selena that we've seen over the years. Like those are all her too. Those are her just acting out different impulses or different versions of herself, in the same way that like a musician might have a different style for one album and change it for the next, and have a different visual thing, like Lady Gaga from album to album or whatever, so there's an element of, seeing these characters as people and as kind of performance artists as well, or professional wrestlers kind of, this is a Gotham where you can look out your window and you see people fighting, in the same way that you might, watch them on a professional wrestling show.
When you draw, do you listen to music? Any specific genre or artists you like? Or
I've been all over the place. I mean, sometimes listening to music, sometimes just letting TV play in the background. It used to be, I would listen to music. When writing, I can't really do that much. Actually, the more silence, the better. Yeah. I tend to find it a little distracting. But once I'm drawing, definitely music is good. If I'm watching a movie or if I'm playing a movie or TV episodes or something like that, it usually has to be something that I don't have to pay a lot of attention to. So it's either rewatching something or watching something that's not very visual, which sadly is a lot. There's a lot of TV out there you don't actually need to pay that much attention to. So yeah, just, anything actually to kind of just keep me in the chair working, because otherwise if I get distracted and kind of start walking around and doing other things, then, that really cuts down on how much I get done during the day.
But yeah, I love the story where it's like, I mean, did you have this in mind the whole time, or did it just naturally come out where it's like almost like a comparison between Bruce and Selena, where, it's basically the whole theme of the thing is like, yeah, she cares, but he's like, I'm not going to be Bruce. I'm not, I'm not Bruce. I'm going to do things my way.
Yeah, that was definitely baked into the premise, was to look at Gotham, like, Gotham's fortunes being dictated so much by the the fighting between Batman and the Joker and Commissioner Gordon, like they're intertwined, and the fact that out of the three of them, no one can actually win, and like if Gordon were able to clean up the GCPD, then maybe he wouldn't need Batman, so a lot of, the dynamic in Gotham is around those three men. And the way they, how competitive they are with each other, and how they choose to, how they choose to go at each other, and the idea was, what if there's a different way, and maybe Selina and Barbara Gordon represent, a new path for for Gotham, to move forward. So, it's an examination of that. I wouldn't say that there's, any answers, but I think there's some hope there that by the end, things might change for the better.
And if the powers that be came to you and offered you a sequel to this, would you be interested in doing
or
a sequel?
A prequel?
Well, yeah, prequel would work, but are you just like, this is my story, beginning, end. Yeah, I don't want to tell you what comes next. I don't want to tell you what came before.
No, I mean, there's a lot of room to play in this universe. I could definitely see there being prequels or sequels, and definitely have ideas about what stories that I could tell. I don't know if they'd be centered on Selina. I feel like her story has been told, but I don't know, come back to me in 6 months, I might have a new story, that makes sense for her, that you would want to follow. But I think there's a lot of other characters there that are interesting that I could, explore a little bit more, either their history before Lonely City or after or during even, yeah.
Would you want to tell a complete, show us the whole Fool's Day?
Oh, Fool's Night. Yeah.
Like
I realized, looking back at it the other day, it's like I'm relying on the audience to fill in a lot of what happened, but to actually do a more explicit, showing like what happened that night and why it's had this effect on the city, without spoiling anything. I don't think I can at this point, but the idea behind Fool's Night is that the Joker has, through his social media following, through his YouTube live broadcasts and stuff like that, has a huge fan base of really troubled and disaffected people who he is then, through kind of subliminal and coded language, gets them basically to just kind of all riot at the same time. And that overwhelms, the police force, it overwhelms the Bat family. And they all do it wearing these clown masks. And eventually, after a lot of damage and violence and death and, it gets put down, but what happens the next day? What happened? A lot of these people, just went home, put their mask away. And then the next day you're sitting at work next to somebody who might've been out there beating people with a bat, the night before. So it's this kind of idea that the city itself is traumatized because you don't know what your neighbors might or might not have done. You don't know who, and so that's what, triggers this whole ban on masking, the idea that your privacy is no longer, important because for public safety reasons, and that's how Gotham has moved in this direction, so to show that, a little bit more in story, I think would be nice, just to fill that in and on why the city is the way that it is and why the city so quickly embraced this kind of, big brothery, kind of fascist vision.
But to be fair, Gotham is a city that's always on the brink of something, whether it's destruction, chaos, mayhem, being cut off completely from the rest of the DC world. So, to be fair, it doesn't take much to push them over the edge.
And again, I can see real world. I mean, unfortunately, there are people who can be provoked kind of easily.
Yep. Radicalization via online. It's a real thing.
Man, I have to go back and read this. There's a lot more subtext than I don't know if I even realized. Do you sell any original art, or is there any plans to make prints or posters of any of your art? Because I was just flipping through an issue. I'm like, man, I could see this hanging on a wall or something.
Yeah, no, thank you. I'm holding on to the art for now. I think because the nature of this project, how big it was for me, and how personal it is, just means I don't feel ready to sell the art, and it might be that I never feel quite comfortable doing that. So we'll see. As far as prints and posters, you'll have to ask DC about that.
Petition ready. Gotcha. Do you get out to a lot of cons, or do you plan? I mean, well, I can't even say post-pandemic, but in these times right now, do you have any plans?
I've done a few shows here and there. I think this is the new realities. We kind of have to just see how safe we are at any given moment, and what the numbers are like and all that stuff. I went to Baltimore Comic-Con last year and had a great time. I went to San Diego this year and, it felt pretty safe. They required masking on the floors. There's no reason not to do that. I wish more conventions would do that anyway. I mean, every year, you hear about people
that
coming away with
convention crud,
so
yeah.
This would definitely cut down, and you got half the people are in masks and doing cosplay anyway. So
Do you like the big cons or smaller cons?
Well, look, anything that's going to be in an enclosed space doesn't matter.
So
I just feel like I've outgrown Comic-Con. I've found that I like Emerald City, Midtown, places
some of these smaller shows, definitely the huge shows, they're their own kind of thing. But I love going to places like Emerald City or Heroes Con. It's much more intimate, and you get to really talk with people, and it just doesn't feel as crazy, and you're not competing with all the other media stuff, like video games and toys and all that stuff, movies, it's nice to be at a show where comics are the main focus, and to be able to talk with your readers.
Yeah, I think I like the smaller ones better when they do it's more purely comics. Lilith.
Oh, I'm sorry. That was my question.
Okay. So you said the collected edition is going to be a hardcover edition.
Mm-hmm.
In time
That's
for
right.
the
Yeah,
I
I think
believe
all
it's
the
for
Black
pre-order,
Label.
right?
What's that?
I think it was pre-order.
Yeah. It's coming out December 13th. I think all the Black Label books come out in hardcover first, and hopefully it'll do well enough to warrant a softcover edition. But it should be pretty cool. And if you can get the retailer, the direct market variant, that should be pretty cool too. The whole dust jacket kind of unfolds into this cool poster.
I know we're looking forward when you come up here, Lilith, at the end of December.
That's fine. If that's what you want for Christmas, Phil.
No, I mean for you, because you always buy 20 variants.
I do. It's a habit. It's a bad habit.
Yeah, no, that sounds great. I was going to say I can never wait. I was going to buy the original, the onesie singles before the even gets collected, especially with this book. But no,
thank you for buying it and reading it. Without that, there wouldn't even be a hardcover, right?
Well, you said you hope.
Exactly.
Well, you said you hope the response is good enough for a soft cover. I mean, everywhere I saw it, I mean, this thing was getting praised. I know we've been praising it every issue, so I think it'll be warranted. And again, I mean, it's in the Batman universe. I think that helps. I mean, the Batman movie with Catwoman was out this year. I think that gets name recognition out there too. I mean, that puts Catwoman in everyone's head.
Puts eyeballs in the Barnes and Noble.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
Right. I mean, we're the hardcore, comics fans, so, and it's great to see the response from that audience, and then now with the hardcover, when that's out there, then that's the kind of thing that slowly kind of spreads out beyond, say, comic shops, to a regular bookstore, and to see, hopefully that, it gets some other people who haven't been reading comics, either back into it or it's their first comic. I like to think that even though, it's it's meant to be kind of complex and nuanced and stuff like that, but that it's still very approachable as a comic. That hopefully there's nothing in it that's too tricky for someone who hasn't read a comic before.
Oh no, I would give this to anyone and be like, "Hey, read this. It's it's good. You don't have to know 80 years of Batman history." Oh no, it works. So are you working on anything currently right now that we should be on the lookout for in the future?
I'm working on some covers here and there, but other than that, taking some time off just to kind of regroup and figure out what I want to do next. I think this project has meant a lot. It's been the last 3 years of my life, and for everybody, it's been a pretty interesting few years. So I think I have the luxury of I can spend the next couple months just either trying some different things out, figuring out what kinds of projects I might be more interested in doing, just to have the energy to do and really throw myself into 100%. So so no plans as of yet. I mean, I'm talking with people, I'm thinking about stuff, but it might be a while before you see a comic from me on the stands, but before then, covers for sure.
Hey, take the rest. You deserve it. I mean, I kept having to remind myself reading this. I'm like, this is all one man. I mean, this would be, if this was regularly, this would be the job of 3-4 people. Yeah.
And it would have been, it certainly would have come out sooner. That's the only downside of doing it this way is I couldn't divvy up the work with myself, it's so if I'm coloring, maybe someone else could be lettering, that kind of thing, you really are able to compress the timeline a lot, but I'm
it turned out to be a nice quarterly treat, honestly.
Oh yeah, I mean, I was like, oh, I want to get to that last issue, but I mean, I understand it's just you, and it's so good. I'm like, you know what? Let him take his time, so we don't rush it.
I needed to recover emotionally every single time anyway. So.
I know. That's the thing, yeah.
Yeah, you hit all the highs and all the lows and everything in between.
Yeah, I wanted each issue to feel pretty meaty, and to really kind of feel like its own chapter, as opposed to just a section of the book, of the story, which is why I very deliberately wanted to call, each issue book 1, book 2, book, just because there's definitely a shape to each issue, that I think goes from beginning, middle, and end, and that builds, the whole story through all 4 issues. But each issue, it has its own. It's not necessarily standalone, but I think is, has a complete arc in it.
Oh yeah, it's definitely chapters, and again, I'm sorry I keep raving, but yeah, I mean this is again, you should be proud of this story again, especially since you did everything. And please, DC, put out posters or something. I want something for the walls in here. So, all right, Lilith, do you have any?
Do you have room? Do I have to tell Danielle?
Hey, my wife lets me have one room. You know what? I can put whatever I want up. All right, Lilith, unless you have any other questions, should we let this man go?
Absolutely.
He's put in a lot of work this year, just right here. So
Thank you so much for doing this. You've been a real treat. It's been a real honor and a real pleasure.
Oh no, thanks. Yeah, thanks so much for having me on. It's really now that the book is out, it's so great to be able to share it with everybody and to see that people are so excited about it. It means a lot. It's a lot of work has gone into it, a lot of blood, sweat, and tears and stuff like that. And just for people to read it and not, and for it not to just be kind of forgotten or ignored, just, it's very important to me, and it means a lot. So thank you for having me on. It really, it's helping me, with recover from this whole experience.
Oh, don't worry. I think no one's going to forget this for a long time. I think this is going to go up on the list of, when people say, oh, the top 10 Catwoman stories or whatever, it's going to be on there. So,
cool. Thank you.
All right. So once again, thank you, sir, for your time, and everyone. The great Cliff Chiang. Go pick up Catwoman: Lonely City. All four issues are out now. The collected edition, you said, is out in December, right?
December 13th.
All right. So yes, if you can't find the issues, or do both, get the issues and get the hardcover.